All right. Hello, everyone. So, if you clicked on this video, it is probably because you are feeling stuck. And if you're anything like me and you are creative, you are in the right place. If you're like me, you have a ton of awesome ideas, creative skills, and you even feel like you could see yourself finishing these projects someday. But it might be hard for you to get going on them. You might be in a job where right now you're working for someone else and kind of trying to get the skills that you want to eventually work on maybe your plans, your projects. So you've just been kind of putting your dreams on hold and working for the man for a bit. Sorry, I do have a little bit of a cold, so bear with me on the voice. But yeah, I mean, for me, like I would feel lucky, honestly, in a day if I even got to kind of use my creativity. I would feel like that day was special because most of the time it was just monotonous daily job work. But to make everything worse, honestly, it sounds like everyone is saying that machines are coming to take our boring jobs away. So that job that we literally need in order to survive, that we don't even want, but we literally just have because we need money to live in this society. If that sounds like you, you're not alone at all. And it doesn't have to be like this. There's a lot of creative types like us who have found ourselves working in jobs that we honestly like barely get through each day. And it seems like the only hope that's really been thrown out there for artists and a lot of creative types is that someday someone will buy our work. When we put forth enough effort and build a following enough, someone will pay money for our end result, our work. And honestly, now that seems harder than ever because people can make similar end results at a push of a button. That's a talk for another time. But honestly, even selling artwork, I mean, I know people who do that for a living, and it sometimes is very hard to make a full living on that, even if you are relatively well known online. I personally have struggled with this, even though I wouldn't say that I'm super well known. Selling artwork just doesn't seem like it could reasonably ever be my main path for income. So I get it, believe me. And I tried really hard to fit into corporate life and I burned out like crazy. If anyone understands burnout, it is me. I have gone through almost yearly bouts of unemployment where I would struggle with trying to fit into corporate life, trying to struggle to do my best work for someone else, right? And fit into the culture and all that jazz. Because I was like, I need a livable salary, and I live in one of the most expensive cities in the world. So I needed a high-paying tech job, and I worked my ass off trying to fit into that type of culture. And after 8 months of pushing myself super hard and working my ass off, honestly, accepting the weird criticisms from people who didn't seem to know what they were talking about, because it doesn't matter. They're my boss, right? I have to appease them, and I have to I learned more than being creative. I learned how to pitch my ideas in a way that corporate CEOs would enjoy them. And that's an interesting skill. It's an interesting skill to have. But after 8 months of doing that, day after day, full 8 hours, maybe more, I would just completely break down. Like I would be unable to get out of bed. I would be unable to work, unable to even talk to people. My friends know I would just go through periods of time when I just could not respond to them. I could not be social. I could not do anything. And I mean, it looks like stereotypical, like depression really, but what it was truly, that is what burnout actually looks like. Like you can't do anything for months. It takes a long time to recover from truly burning out. And for me, I only got like 8 months to maybe a year and a half of work before I would completely burn out. And I understand that I was pushing myself very hard. In a large way, I was pushing myself more than I needed to because I was so stressed out about knowing somewhere inside that I didn't really fit into that culture. But it would happen. It would happen. And I just continuously, the second that I was back up and ready, I would have to, out of necessity, out of financial necessity, I would have to get back on that horse and start applying for another soul crushing job, right? And it just has been getting harder and harder each time. The breakdowns become worse and worse. If you've ever experienced anything like this, like there is no advice in the universe that really can fix the problem once you are in a breakdown, once you are burned out. You just have to kind of recuperate in any way you can, and it just takes time. It takes a long time, sadly. But yeah, it took me years of therapy and thinking, that there's something wrong with me for me to finally realize that it was literally just my inner self's way of telling me that is not for me, that no matter what I do, I will never fit in to that style of living. It was just saying no, like absolutely not, stop. And it was pushing back. And when I reflect, I realize that every time that I would take one of those jobs, I was being set back. Like I was being set back so much in my creative career, basically, in what I really should have been doing. It was not just putting it on pause. It was truly setting it backwards. Like I have to recover from what I have done to my mind by like letting those cultures become a part of me. And it was also wasting, of course, my most valuable resource, my time. I can never get that time back. And every single year, it feels like it set me back like at least one more year in addition to wasting a year of my life. So it just was not an option for me. For some of us, I truly believe that it is not really our decision whether or not we want to be a creative or not. Like some people have that luxury. Some people, they're a little bit more methodical in their approach. They could choose, they could take it or leave it being an artist, That is not how it is for me. It is a calling that I cannot resist. When I try to resist it, it just wrecks my life. Like being creative is not an option. It is a must. And even though I got better and better at prolonging the inevitable breakdown, and sometimes, I could go up to 2 years in one job, right? But it would always end badly and increasingly more badly. Pretty much until I finally just allowed myself to pursue my actual creative interests. And truly, that was the key to curing myself of this cycle. And ever since I've really been seeing what that's been doing for me, I have become very impassioned by the idea that I can share what I've learned and the systems that I've created to help save other artists and creatives from this hell, basically, this hellish cycle of just crashing and burning every so odd amount of months, I guess. But I know what you're thinking. Maybe you've even tried this before. I definitely had. I took some time off, right, during one of these bouts of unemployment, and I tried really hard to make my art career work. I tried drawing every day. But if we have to get up and paint every day, even that feels like work, right? Like I was struggling with this because I also couldn't just get up and spend 8 hours a day drawing. That didn't work for me either. And I know that does work for some people. And I've seen artists succeed through doing that, through kind of brute forcing it and becoming amazing through doing that. That just wasn't working for me. And if that doesn't work for you, do not worry. That is kind of what the system is all about. So I finally found something that works, and it really does stem from truly allowing yourself to pursue any creative passion at any time. So that means not really following a lot of the advice that you've heard probably about business advice, about choosing a niche, choosing one path, choosing one skill and honing in on that and like making that your thing, becoming a master of that. And of course, like the bad side of this is that you have to forge your own path. But in doing so, I can guarantee that you will be able to produce more and you will be happier. And this has the potential to create more wealth than you would be able to make on your own through following like a beaten path, a path that millions of people have been down. There is a cap to how much you can make on that type of path because there are people ahead of you. It's kind of like a pyramid scheme almost. But if you're making your own path, you have the potential to be the top of a pyramid, right? In a sense, not in a scammy sense, but truly, if you forge your own path, you will have the luxury of sharing this with others, having people follow your path and creating wealth. So how do you do it? Basically, if you follow this guide, I'm going to lay out the entire system, basically what I've been doing and how I've found that I do not burn out and can produce a lot more in a day. You will find, if you follow this and you are a creative person, that you will wake up really excited to start the day each day, and that burnout just isn't really a thing anymore. And what I've been seeing is that I'm just able to produce a lot more than I ever thought was possible for myself. And it's just fun the entire time because I'm not forcing myself into any box at all. I'm just doing what I feel like doing in the moment. And there are some very core rules to this, and there are some tricks. So I'm going to go over them. You have to listen to this advice, though. If you don't follow every part of this that I've laid out, it will not work for you. And I would start from step 1 because it is the most important, and it builds on every other step builds on itself. So builds on the previous steps. Right. All right. So I'm going to go through it. Step 1 is to fix your mindset, and please do not click off. I know I hate that word, but this is more of just an understanding that you have to understand. You have to get this one truth. And if you can solidify that inside yourself, this will all work. If not, if you do not agree with this one statement, this will not work. It just won't. You'll always go back to the way that life was. And so you really have to solidify that this is true. You have to believe it in your core, and you have to maybe even remind yourself of this constantly until you really do believe it. But you will prove it to yourself through working this system. So in order for this to work, you need to understand 2 things. And the first is that nothing in this world is more important in your life than creating what you are meant to create, creating what you want to create. That is the number 1 priority. There is nothing else that is more important than that. And that's really hard for a lot of us to get. And for me, that was the hardest part. And I feel like I didn't even start from there. But when I did put that into play, everything else clicked, because that makes decisions easy, right? Like that makes a lot of these excuses null. And so the second part is you have to understand that you are the only one that can take responsibility for creating what you're meant to create, for doing this. And if you look at these 2 understandings, what they really mean is that you cannot be blaming any external circumstances for where you're at. And I know that's really hard, especially when you're feeling stuck. I am the queen of finding someone else to blame for my problems, something else, maybe society itself. But nothing changed for me until I took responsibility for it myself. And honestly, it doesn't get you anywhere. Sitting there and blaming things that are outside of your control, or even things that are a little bit inside of your control. This has to be priority 1. Priority 1 has to be creating the thing that you are here to create. And maybe it's a million things, but you have to put those as priority 1. And just remember that you're the only one that can take control of the situation and do that. That means that you truly have to stop blaming anything else. And that means finances too. You can't be saying, oh, I'll work on that project once I have enough money for that new Wacom tablet, right? That is bullshit. And I think you would know if you heard someone say that was bullshit. You can do with what you have. You can. And no matter how real you think that these excuses are, they truly are all in your head. There are obviously serious circumstances where people are held back from being able to take the time to create, and I understand that. But I truly believe that if you take a look at even your financial situation, a lot of the things that you might think that you need to spend money on, you don't. And there are a lot of things that you can do to kind of restructure your life and prioritize creating. And that is something that I had to do in order to make this work. And it's hard. It's tough sometimes. It can ruin relationships. It can change the course of your life. You might not really get a lot of support from people when you first start doing this. It's kind of hard for people to see what you're doing or any value when you first start doing it. You have to trust the system. And trust me when I say that. I mean, here's some things that I always thought was stopping me, and I realized they really were not real. They were all in my head. Things like money and bills are something that I was like, I need to have a high-paying job in order for me to live in this city, right? It just wasn't true. Like, I didn't need to have a fancy apartment right next to my office, like, especially if I chose to create, right? The society that we live in, I loved this past 2 years blaming our society for all of my problems. I loved using that as a scapegoat and just saying, if only they would just pay me, like if only they would pay artists more. There's just so many things that I can say that feel like perfect excuses for why I can't be my true creative self, right? I think for a lot of you, you might be struggling with your family being a blocker. For me, that definitely had been the case before. Not so much now, but I can relate to that, and I understand where you're coming from with that. But it is all in your head. The expectations your family have for you, unless you are obviously under 18 and still living under their roof, that is an option that you're choosing to let them take priority. I understand how hard that can be, but if you really acknowledge that your creations are the most important, you will see that shouldn't stop you from creating what you're meant to create. Friends also, although I feel like that's a lot more about choosing good friends, right? I definitely had a friend who, every time I would talk about making a piece of art, they would be like, why wouldn't you just buy that? And I don't know why, but that actually like set me back a couple months. I let that like pull me back from actually creating, and that was ridiculous. That was my own choice. So remember that you have every right to pursue your own passions in this life. And the only thing that's really holding you back is yourself and you letting these excuses actually take a hold of you. And I know this is really hard to hear, and you can have all the excuses in the world. And if you have a situation that you want to talk about in the comments, please feel free to do so. I would love to hear about it. But I think it's important to notice that a lot of this is just conditioning, mental conditioning, things that we were told we have to do no matter what, and that should take priority over our own interests. And it's just not true. You have every right to do your projects, to create your ideas and to pursue your passion. And let me assure you that like I've gone through all of the money issues and I'm still here. I'm still living a happy life. And those societal rules that I used to work so hard to maintain at the expense of my own health and happiness and even wealth, because in the end I ended up with nothing. They genuinely were not real. And I'm not telling you to go into debt or break the law, but I want it to be some comfort to you that you can survive anything, and trying to fit into this world perfectly is not even going to increase your chances of thriving in it. In fact, it kind of guarantees you, as I said, a mediocre life. So if you're looking for thriving, if you're looking for more, it's not going to cut it. All right, so moving on to step 2, once you've got your understanding and your mindset down, stop self-soothing with addictions. And I did not want to do this one for a really long time. It was really hard for me to actually buckle down and do this. And I did find out why it was so hard. So I'm gonna lay it out for you so it'll be easier for you if you're following the system. So I know that basically as a creative, it's easy to try to forget about our problems, try to, distract from the fact that we don't really fit in to what society wants. We want to distract ourselves from that fact by escaping and end up getting addicted to crap that really just makes things worse for our future selves. So you'll need to understand that after a long day's work, after you're exhausted and you're tired and you're frustrated, throwing yourself on the couch and saying, I worked really hard today, I deserve to scroll TikTok for a little bit. That is absolute nonsense. And you have to see it for the nonsense that it is. Because you're basically saying, I had a hard day, so I'm going to make sure that tomorrow is even harder for myself. There are ways to rest and recuperate that don't get you addicted to fleeting dopamine hits. And those are what I would opt for. There are fun things to do that don't get you addicted in this cycle. So take your rest and rewards and recuperation in a way that actually benefits you and makes the next day easier instead of harder. And I think a lot of us already understand the dopamine phenomenon that we're going through with social media. But if you don't, I highly recommend you look into it. I might make a video on it in the future, but there's a lot of info out there already. So my big don'ts, things that I try to avoid when I am feeling at my weakest, when I'm feeling like I need to recuperate or when I'm frustrated with the day, things that I avoid are scrolling on any social media. And I know I've talked myself into scrolling on social media because that's how I work. But when you are feeling like you need to recuperate, do not open any social media app. I don't care what your excuse is. You need to just avoid it because it is an addictive cycle. And the addictive cycles affect us more when we are in our weakened state, when we are, kind of frustrated, when we are like tired and exhausted. So do not let them take you when you are at your weakest. It's fine to do these things. Scrolling on social media, binge watching Netflix would be another one. Just don't do that when you're at your weakest. You can do that for fun. When you have a lot of energy and you're just trying to enjoy the day, on Saturday or something. I try to avoid doing those things when I am feeling frustrated. And another huge one is going out and drinking, which is something that I do for fun still. And I know a lot of people have just cut that out altogether. But I try to avoid doing that if I am frustrated, if I'm angry. And I think that's really important because it is an addictive cycle and it can be bad if you turn to that when you're frustrated, when you need self-soothing, basically. Snacking is another one. I kind of try to cut that out, although every once in a while I will do it. Again, just not when I am frustrated, not after a long day's work or something like that. So in that situation, though, after a long day's work, after you are exhausted and you really do need to relax and recuperate, you're taking a break from your project, for example, here are some things that you can do that are fun and energizing, and they will actually be recuperative. Creating something. That's what this is all about, right? Creating something just for the fun of it. Do not put any pressures on yourself. Just kind of open up a sketchbook and sketch or write, journal. Just creating something in general is in a fun way. Don't put any pressure on it. Just create. That's a great one to go to. Obviously, if you're still watching this, you are creative. So feel free to jump to that one. Going for a walk is also another one. I don't necessarily love walks the way that a lot of people do. I'm kind of trying to fall in love with it more because a lot of people that I talk to now really love walks, and I haven't really gotten there yet. The outdoors still feels icky to me. So, but I cannot deny that when I do go for a walk, I feel a lot more clear-headed for the day. So that is a good one to jump to, especially if you're not feeling up to creating at the moment or you're taking a break from a project. Sometimes creating is not the right thing to recuperate from creating. And reading educational content, listening to Audible, that's also a good way to, especially if you're right now, your vice is watching YouTube videos or watching TV, it'll be easy to transition to watching or reading or, listening to educational content. But there is one catch to doing this, and that is that you have to take notes. You may not, in the system, you may not even read or consume educational content without taking notes. You need to be creating when you are consuming at any time. those are just the rules. And honestly, you will see a very big difference in this, because when it comes time to create, you'll just have a ton of ideas because you've taken so many notes. I highly recommend this. You could even take notes on things that aren't necessarily educational content, if you're careful about it. As long as you are observing and you have something to take notes on, you can turn anything into a learning experience. So keep that in mind, but do take notes. Even when you're exhausted, it's not that hard. Open a notes app, write in a little notebook. It doesn't matter. Another one is engaging in meaningful conversation. And I understand that this can be kind of stressful for some of us. So don't jump to this one if it exhausts you, if it like uses up a lot. But if you have close friends, what I mean by meaningful is not that it has to be, educational or business related or even philosophical. I mean meaningful because you care about that person and because, you feel comfortable with them. I do not mean social media. Again, do not open social media. Do not take this as an excuse to open social media like you're going to engage in a meaningful conversation there or something. No, that's not what this is. And then honestly, if all of those seem too daunting, if they seem like you don't have enough energy to do any of those, just sleep. Like, just go to sleep. And I'm guilty of this too. Like when I should be sleeping, when I'm so exhausted that I really need to sleep, what I used to do is put on a show, right? I would, and then I'd end up watching show after show after show, not sleeping, and getting myself into this weird addictive loop that the next day I feel like crap. So sometimes you really just have to acknowledge that it's time to sleep and that you're not going to feel better until you sleep. So keep that in mind. If you don't think that you could do any of the things on this list, it's time to sleep. And I have also had sleeping issues, so I understand if you're laying there for more than like 15 minutes, maybe more than 20 minutes, I would recommend just getting up and maybe giving one of these things a shot. Watching and reading educational content is probably the lowest tier. Even a fiction book would be fine, right? And sometimes can help you get to sleep. But take a break, try it out, try to sleep. You need to be resting in a recuperative way is what I'm saying. You need to be concentrating on revitalizing yourself. And if you're wondering if you have an activity that you really like doing and you're not quite sure like which list it would go on, definitely ask yourself whether it revitalizes you when you're done or if it gets you caught in a loop where you want to do it again. And I purposefully did not add video games to this list, even though that's something that I really enjoy doing, because I do strongly believe that they can be used in a creative way. They can be used in a way that revitalizes you and can recuperate and can help you process the day a little, but they can also be addictive. So it's really up to you in each moment, really. It could vary day to day and game to game, right? But you have to determine whether or not you're trying to do it because you want to distract yourself from the day and escape, or if you kind of feel like you're excited about the creative aspects in the game, or you think it will help you process and recuperate from your day. So it really varies person to person, but some of these are just so addictive that I'm sorry, they are just complete no-nos. Like TikTok, I don't care if it's part of your business model. You cannot just scroll on TikTok to recuperate. It just doesn't work like that. You have to be very intentional about everything that you're doing. And when you are in a weakened state, you need to have things that you can fall back on and that are still relaxing and recuperative, that are not going to get you in these cycles. I think I went through that enough, but if you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to move on to step 3, and that is what this entire thing is about: creating everything that you can. And that's it. That's the whole purpose of this, is just being able to create. If you've done the first 2 steps, this should be easier for you, and you will have laid the foundation for being able to do this effectively. But please do not waste your time trying to choose a path, trying to lay out your artistic career or your creative career and say, this is where I'm going to go, this, and this. The whole point of this is that no path that exists is for you. There is no path that you will be able to come up with in your brain right now or see out there in the world that is going to work for you. And I know that that's really hard to hear because that means that there's no guarantee. And I know you've heard people say that you should just choose one thing and master it. And honestly, that is a good way to start. It sounds like if you're stuck, that you have started down doing that and you have run into issues with that. And I have to tell you something. Basically, choosing a path is an option for people who don't have the ability to forge their own path. And if you are creative, if you believe yourself to be creative, you are not one of those people. That's what creative means. Creative means that you create your own path. And there are paths, obviously, that have been created by others. I'm talking about things that you would call a career path, right? Like something that you know works, something that someone else has done, something that already has a job title associated with it. Choosing one of those is definitely a guaranteed route to basically a mediocre life. And some people can't even do that. And I am talking about myself. If you're feeling like you're behind, it is probably because following someone else's path, as you've been doing, has not been working for you. And it may also be because you have been neglecting one of the previous steps. So please take those to heart. And I think if you really hear still watching this, it's because it's time for you to take control and forge your own path. And it's really not always easy. So I have some tips for how to do that in the best way. And the first one is to truly dig inside and get to know yourself really well. You do have a completely unique set of experiences and interests and skills and goals. And if you truly followed your own interests and your passions, and you are constantly creating, that is key, then you are guaranteed to create something amazing that no one else can create. And that's kind of what this whole thing is about. So you do have to get to know yourself. You have to dig deep. I recommend journaling for this. I will make other videos specifically on that topic because I think it's really important. And I spent the entire last 2 years focused on that. I took a lot of courses. I journaled a lot. I have thick books of journals. I would love to share with you some of those strategies, but that is for another video. My next tip is to, of course, create indiscriminately. And that really means do not discriminate about what you create. Just create. If you come up with an idea, it's your duty to create it. It is not up to us to determine the worth of our creations. It is not up to us to say, oh, I don't think this is going to be valuable, even though I really want to do it. I don't think anyone will like it. I don't think I'll make money. It's gibberish. Just put that out of your mind and understand that as creators, as creative people, it is your duty to create what you want to create for this world. You simply have to do what you find fulfillment in doing. And honestly, you will be surprised that more often than not, it's the things that you thought weren't valuable at all, things that you almost didn't post because you're so embarrassed of them, that people like the most and that gives them the most value. We've all seen this, I think, at this point. If you really didn't want to post an ugly sketch and you decided to post it, it probably did a lot better than some finished pieces that you spent days on. And that's because people actually like things that show that you're human. And there's a lot of psychology around this, but it's going to be even more important to prove your humanity as the years go on. And I'll go into that also on another video. But I think you need to get out of the habit of judging your own creations and trying to decide its worth. You don't decide its worth. You just create. That's your job. And I will go over actually analyzing your process and your projects, but that is for after. You need to be able to, at the beginning of a project, you should not be discriminating, saying this isn't worth doing. Just do it if you feel like doing it, if you want to do it, if you're inspired to do it. Create. And of course, the next tip is learn by doing. Start the project and then learn. I know a lot of us get stuck in the research phase. We're just obsessed with learning as much as we can. Maybe you have class addiction like I do, or course addiction, where you just become kind of addicted to taking classes. I know this is just us wanting to take a path, a class is going to take you on a path that, you're like, that's guaranteed results. Don't do that. Don't get stuck in that, because if you don't start one of these projects that you actually want to do, nothing that you learn in that class is going to stick, because you're not applying it to something that you actually care about. If you start a project just for a class that you don't actually care about, it's not getting you anywhere. You're basically just wasting your time. So start a project that you actually care about, and learn along the way. It doesn't matter if you know how to do it the best way, or if you think that you're ready to start the project. Just start it. And then as you hit roadblocks, research online. There's a ton of free resources. Don't spend money on a class right now. That's not what I'm saying. Please don't. Just research online. Google is your friend. YouTube is great. Everything is here. You can find all the information. And one thing that I've done in the past is when I feel myself really wanting a class, because I think the thought in my head that makes me want to buy a class the most is, I don't even know where to start. Like, where do I start? How do I even start this? Try out just making your dream class syllabus. Like if you wanted a class in this exact thing, write out an outline of like what that class syllabus would look like. And then in order, of course, like the order that your best guess of what order you would put things in. And then just try to fill it out and adjust as necessary, research as necessary to fill it out, and be working on your project the entire time. And by the end of it, ideally, as you run into roadblocks and you research further, or you find even your own tips and tricks through working on your project, you can add that to the syllabus. And at the end of that, you have a very, very clear guide of how you got to where you are, how you finished the project. And this is great for being able to reflect. It's also great to be able to share with others and let them follow in your footsteps, follow your path. So, a good option there, if you feel yourself being addicted to classes, you can make your own class. So consider that. Be your own teacher. My next tip is to tweak as you go. And this is about reflecting on each project. But do not try to assess your project before you finish it. Do create it. And then look back, see what you enjoyed about it, see what you didn't enjoy, see what you were good at, see what you were fast at, see where you were slow and it could be improved. Brainstorm ideas for getting faster at certain things so that you can actually complete projects faster. And if you are smart enough to do this really well, you will create a path that is so solid and refined that you will be able to help others create more effectively and have them follow your path. People will gravitate to you because they will want to be able to create the way that you do. I think that someone that comes to mind really well is Sam Does Arts. He is so fast with his drawings, and I think that really inspires people, and to see how good they turn out and how quickly he's able to do them. He's truly refined his process, and that took creating. That took a long time to do, and it took analyzing. So tweak as you go. Sharing your path is what it's all about. So my last tip is, of course, to share all of it. Share your entire process. Share as you go. Share your path. And remember that you don't own your path. You're creating it for this purpose specifically. Do not gatekeep. Do not worry about copycats. Those people copying your style. You know that gets my goat. Those people are your pupils. They are an opportunity for you to guide others and create value for others. This is exactly the reason that you don't have to worry about each individual project creating value, because as a whole, you are creating value for others by creating. There are people that have other things they want to create, and you can help them as you refine your process. And I do want to spit out there also that the very act of creating itself is valuable to mankind. That's something that we've all agreed on. So also do not worry about your projects not being valuable. The act of creating is what's creating value, but share it so you can magnify that value. And yeah, I mean, honestly, if you can do this, that is it. That is the entire system. And if you feel stuck on any one of these parts, let me know. If you think that something doesn't make sense or isn't clicking, or you're like, this doesn't apply to my situation, comment. I will see if I can read, maybe start a conversation there. But every day I am living proof that creating what you want, when you want, actually creates energy instead of draining it. Because I didn't think that I could even do a full 8-hour workday before. And now I honestly find it hard to stop working at the end of the day. Because of this, I can truly produce constantly and not get burned out, because I'm not forcing myself to do any one thing every day. And I know this is hard. I know that this is a very different way of looking at things. And I know I didn't talk about finances or actually starting a business in this, which is very crucial to actually being able to thrive in this system. But it all starts from being able to create consistently, because if you cannot do that, it's not going to work. You're having your own business, anything, it's not going to work. So this is the first step, and it's been the first step for me, and I will let you in on this entire journey. I plan on sharing it all because that is a huge part of this. But yeah, I do believe that most people are still stuck in pretending that they are someone that they are not, because they're kind of worried that there's not going to be value at the end of that tunnel. There's not going to be any value for other people if they just do what they feel like in any given moment. If they just created, the silly comics that they want to do. That's definitely something that I kept going back and forth on. I was just like, how is this actually going to benefit anyone? Maybe it will not make money. I understand the worries. I do. And I think that a lot of people think that the only way to prove that they deserve to be a part of society and that they're valuable is to show that they can provide value in a way that has already been proven by others. And that's why people want to go down those paths, so that they can prove maybe to themselves and maybe to others that they can provide value that other people can provide. But if you are a true creative and if you have creative skills, you will find yourself getting antsy and frustrated when you're not living up to your full potential. And you'll honestly find yourself struggling when you're being held back from your creative projects. And it's all basically just from this invented need to fit into a box of society and to do what you're told. And I'm here to tell you that you do not have to be that person. And in fact, if you are struggling to be that person, it's probably because you cannot ever be that person. And if you're like me, you will not find true fulfillment until you actually admit to yourself that your ideas deserve to be created. And I will leave you with a strong core belief that I have been seeing become more and more true every day. But it is possible for 1 week of working on a passion project of your own to be more valuable to this world than a year of work on someone else's project. So take that in, because I seriously have seen this, and I have worked, 1 year at a lot of places, and I love being able to provide value for other people in that scenario. But I can guarantee that working on something that you're actually passionate about and that you're seeing all of the benefits from and enjoying for just 1 week can measure up to a year. And part of that is because you can do a lot more. You can publish a lot more. You can create a lot more that way. And that's what I'm seeing. And that's what I love to share. I think that my biggest struggle has been productivity. And that word's kind of weird. So, I think that being a creative, you don't want to really focus on producing as much as you possibly can. But when creating is fun for you, that becomes an enjoyable process and not such a robotic one and not such a mechanized one. So if you enjoyed this video or that resonated with you, I'm planning on making a lot more content like this. I have just started a newsletter that will have very similar content as this channel. So if you like reading or you want to get things in your inbox directly, please check that out. But yeah, I will see you next time.